She was supposed to be a one-night mistake. Then Parker walked into her new job and found that same woman waiting in the boardroom. Powerful, beautiful, untouchable. And looking at her like the night before was only the beginning. This is an original fictional story. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or to actual events is purely coincidental. The first thing Miami taught me was that the city never asks whether you are ready. It just opens another door, another rooftop, another glass elevator, another humid midnight with music pulsing through the walls and somebody beautiful pretending they are not watching you from across the room. By the time that Monday started, I already hated the city a little. By the time it ended, I knew it was going to change my life. 6 months earlier, I had left a woman who knew exactly how to smile while lying. Megan had been talented at that. Soft voice, steady eyes, perfect timing. She could tell you she loved you while checking her phone for someone else's text under the table. It took me longer than I like to admit to realize that betrayal did not always come dressed like cruelty. Sometimes it came dressed like routine. Like shared groceries, Sunday coffee, half-finished conversations, and a kiss on the cheek that meant absolutely nothing by the time it landed. After we ended, I told myself I would focus on work. Work, numbers, structure, clean logic. The things that did not wake up one morning and decide to disappoint you. So when I got the offer from Bradley Capital Group, I took it like someone grabbing the last life raft off a sinking boat. Senior analyst. Better salary. Bigger exposure. Real room to move. The kind of job people in my field did not treat casually. And because my friends were the kind of people who believed every life shift deserved a dramatic toast, they dragged me out on Sunday night to celebrate my new beginning in a rooftop bar where everything was polished to a glow. Brass rails. Smoked mirrors. Dark marble tables that reflected the amber from low lamps. The skyline rose beyond the terrace in bands of electric blue and gold, and the air felt like warm silk against my skin. I had not wanted to go. That should be said. I had wanted to stay home, steam my blouse for the morning, triple-check the onboarding email, and maybe pretend I was not quietly terrified about the first day. But Danny, who had known me since college and considered caution a personal insult, had shown up at my apartment in white linen and gold hoops and declared that my post-breakup, post-ed job resurrection era was not beginning with spreadsheets and takeout. So there I was, in a fitted black dress that skimmed my body without trying too hard, my hair down because Danny said it made me look dangerous in a financially responsible way, nursing a drink I had barely touched while my friends took turns telling me my life was finally getting interesting again. New job, Danny said, lifting her glass. New salary, said Tessa. New neighborhood soon, if this place pays what you said it does, Marcus added. And Danny said, narrowing her eyes at me, possibly a new woman if you stop acting like flirting is a felony. I laughed into my drink. I'm not acting like that. You are exactly acting like that. I am celebrating responsibly. Marcus leaned back in his chair, looked me up and down with theatrical sadness and sighed. Parker, you look like somebody's emotionally unavailable fantasy, and yet somehow you are sitting there like a federal employee at a retirement seminar. I snorted despite myself. That is an insane sentence. And accurate, Danny said. I'm not doing this tonight. Doing what? Getting pushed towards some random stranger because you all have decided my character development requires it. Tessa pointed at me. See? This is what heartbreak did. It made you start talking like an article. It made me selective. It made you suspicious, Danny corrected. I opened my mouth to argue, but that was when I felt it. A look. Not the vague kind you sometimes caught from the corner of your eye in a crowded room. Not the casual passing kind. This was a deliberate thing. A held gaze. Warm and direct and almost amused. The kind that made your skin notice before your mind caught up. I turned. At the far side of the rooftop, near the bar, a woman was sitting alone on a high stool with one ankle crossed over the other, a glass in her hand, and enough self-possession to alter the atmosphere around her. Blonde. That was the first thing. Not soft, beachy blonde. Not sweet. Her hair was a brighter shade than that, cool and expensive-looking, falling over one shoulder in smooth waves that caught the light every time she tilted her head. She wore a white suit that looked made for her and probably was, fitted jacket, sharp waist, silk beneath it instead of a blouse, the neckline low enough to be bold and high enough to stay elegant. Gold at her throat. Gold at her wrist. No visible effort anywhere. which meant, of course, considerable effort. Her mouth curved when she saw that I had caught her looking. She did not glance away. She did not look embarrassed. If anything, she looked entertained. Then, with 2 fingers around the stem of her glass, she made the smallest motion in my direction. Not a wave. Not even a full invitation. Just enough. Come here. Marcus saw my face first. He said, delighted. There it is. Danny twisted in her seat, followed my line of sight, and inhaled like she had just seen a luxury car pull to the curb. Well, she murmured. That is not subtle. She's not even pretending to be subtle, Tessa said. I turned back toward them. No. Go. No. Yes. I am not just going to walk over there because some woman in a suit looked at me like she owns mirrors. Marcus put a hand over his heart. That is exactly why you should go. Danny grinned. You don't even have to do anything reckless. Just flirt. Just prove you still can. I know I still can. Then go demonstrate it for science. I should have stayed where I was. That is another thing that should be said. I should have laughed it off, stayed with my friends, gone home before midnight, ironed my shirt one last time, and started Monday like a sane person. Instead, before I could talk myself out of it, my friends started making encouraging, ridiculous noises under their breath, and I found myself standing. The woman at the bar watched me the whole way over. Up close, she was even more dangerous. Her eyes were a gray blue that did not read soft on her. They read precise. Assessing. The kind of eyes that could make silence feel like a test. Her perfume reached me before I fully stopped beside her. Clean citrus first, then something deeper under it, something warmer, wood and amber, and a note I could not name but instantly wanted to lean toward again. Hi, I said, because every polished line that might have lived in my mouth disappeared somewhere between my table and her stool. Her smile deepened. Hi. Her voice was lower than I expected. Smooth. Measured. Not lazy exactly, but unhurried in the way of someone who had never needed to chase anyone. She tipped her head toward the stool beside her. Sit. You say that like you're sure I will. I was. I should have found that annoying. I sat anyway. The bartender appeared almost immediately, as if he had been waiting for permission from her face. She glanced at my glass across the bar and then back at me. You weren't drinking that, she said. It was decorative. That explains the expression. I laughed. And what expression was that? The one that says your friends dragged you here under false pretenses. I angled toward her. You got all that from one look? No, she said. I got the rest from how long you hesitated before walking over. God. She had noticed that too. That's very observant. That's one word for it. The bartender asked what I wanted, and before I could answer, she said, something better than what she was pretending to drink. I looked at her. That's bold. She held my gaze. Was I wrong? I should have pushed back more. I knew that. But there was something about the certainty in her that did not feel like arrogance for its own sake. It felt practiced. Earned. Possibly unbearable in the long term. But magnetic in the short term. Dealer's choice, I told the bartender. The blonde's brow lifted. Just a fraction. Approval? Surprise? Hard to tell. When the bartender moved away, she turned toward me fully. So, are your friends celebrating something? Or were they just bored? My new job. Ah. She lifted her glass. That explains the funeral face. It was not a funeral face. It was very close. I shook my head, smiling despite myself. I start tomorrow. And you're out the night before? That sounds judgmental. It's curiosity. Right. She leaned one elbow on the bar, her body angling toward mine in a way that made the rest of the rooftop blur. What kind of work? Something with numbers, I said. Her mouth tilted. Something with numbers. You. Something with power. That should have sounded ridiculous. Instead, it sounded like an answer. The drink arrived. I tasted it. Bourbon. Citrus, a little smoke, something bitter at the end that made it interesting. Better than what I had before, which irritated me because it meant she had been right twice in under 3 minutes. I see it passed inspection, she said. It's good. I know. I turned on my stool to face her more directly. You always this modest? Only when I'm making a first impression. And what impression is that? She looked me over slowly, not rude about it, not rushed either. My bare shoulders. My hair. My mouth. Back to my eyes. That I'm usually right, she said. The heat in my face had nothing to do with Miami anymore. For a second, we just looked at each other. There are moments when attraction arrives in stages, shy and incremental, building with every shared joke until it becomes undeniable. This was not that. This was immediate. Clean. Sharp enough to divide a night into before and after. I should say here that she did not ask me what I had been through. She did not perform fake intimacy in the first 10 minutes like people who mistake oversharing for closeness. She asked better questions than that. What made me leave my last job? Whether I trusted instinct or data more. What I hated in other people. What I hated in myself. Whether I thought reinvention was real or just better styling. I told her only selected truths. That I left because staying had become smaller than leaving. That I trusted data in public and instinct in private. That I hated dishonesty dressed as kindness. That I hated in myself how long I could endure things after they had already become wrong. She listened like every answer mattered. Not like a woman looking for trivia. Like someone studying the architecture of me. When I asked her what she did, she smiled around the rim of her glass and said, "Tonight? Very little." That's not an answer. It's enough of one. You always mysterious with strangers? Only the interesting ones. I should have rolled my eyes. Instead I said, that line probably works often. It's not a line. No. Usually I'm much worse. I laughed, and this time it surprised both of us. Hers came a half-second later, brief, rich, and real enough to rearrange her face. That was when she became truly beautiful, not just intimidating. The amusement made her younger for a moment. Less sculpted, less controlled. Then the control came back. I liked that I noticed the difference. I liked even more that she seemed aware I had noticed. A breeze moved across the terrace, lifting the hem of my dress against my thigh. She looked at the city, then back at me. "What are you celebrating besides the job?" she asked. "Who says I'm celebrating anything besides the job? You have the face of someone trying very hard to call it a fresh start and not a recovery." That landed hard enough that I looked away first. Not because I was offended. Because she was right. Down on the street, headlights slid like ribbons through the night. Somewhere behind us, a group near the railing broke into loud laughter. Glass touched glass. Music shifted. My friends were pretending not to stare. I took a slower sip and said, "Maybe it's both." She nodded once, like that answer met some internal standard. "Recovery from what?" she asked. I studied her profile for a moment before answering. Clean nose. High cheekbones. Mouth that looked built for wicked remarks and expensive mistakes. There was no pity in her face, which made honesty easier. "Someone who confused being wanted with being valued," I said. Her gaze returned to mine. "That's a nasty lesson." It was efficient. "And now I'm trying to make better decisions." A small smile. "How's that going?" I looked at her white jacket, the gleam of gold at her throat, the calm confidence coming off her in waves, and then I looked directly into her eyes. "Not great." That made her laugh again. Softer this time. "Good," she said. "Good. I don't trust people who only make wise decisions." "Why?" "They're either lying or boring." "I can be boring." "No," she said, certain. "You really can't." There it was again. That certainty. I still did not know her name and already it was getting under my skin. We kept talking. About Miami, though she said very little and somehow still sounded like she belonged to every locked floor in the city. About how some people loved the heat and some people only endured it. About whether ambition made people lonely or just revealed the loneliness already there. About family. She told me she had a brother she was close to. I told her my parents still called every time a storm warning hit, as if I were 12 and not a fully employed adult with renter's insurance. "Do they think you'll blow away?" she asked. "They think I forget to buy water." "Do you?" "Occasionally." That's adorable and deeply irresponsible. Adorable is condescending. Only if you let it be. There were moments in that conversation where I forgot to be careful. That was the first real danger. Not how good she looked. Not how openly she wanted me. Not even how easy the flirting became once I stopped trying to win. It was how quickly she made me feel not managed, not pitched to, not politely handled. Seen, which is worse. At one point, I glanced toward my table and caught Danny making an aggressive thumbs-up motion from behind Marcus's shoulder. I nearly choked on my drink. The blonde followed my gaze. Your friends seem emotionally invested. They think I need to flirt with someone for character growth. And do you? I think they're dramatic. But inaccurate? I was about to answer when she tilted her head, studying me in a way that made my pulse trip once hard. If you're still here with me, I said, more to break the tension than anything else, you should know my friends are going to be unbearable about this for weeks. She smiled. That sounded almost like a warning. It was. Noted. I turned slightly, my shoulder brushing the back of the stool, and let out a breath. And if I survive them, maybe I'll survive the first day tomorrow. You will. You sound very sure for someone who doesn't know what the job is. You have a disciplined face. I stared at her. A disciplined face? Yes. What does that even mean? It means even when you're nervous, you sit like you're trying not to show it. I hated how accurate that was. Then, because she had already read me too well, I said, fine. If you're still here with me and enjoying the disaster, hit like and subscribe to my emotional collapse. Her laugh came out low and surprised, and I felt ridiculously pleased with myself for earning it. I added, and tell me where you're listening from, because apparently I'm taking life advice from friends in Miami rooftop bars now. She shook her head, smiling. You're funny. Don't sound shocked. I'm not. Just rewarded. Rewarded. No one should be allowed to speak like that while looking at someone like that. A little after midnight, my friends drifted over under the excuse of leaving. Introductions happened, though I noticed the blonde gave them nothing useful. No full story. No details. Just enough charm to send them away both impressed and suspicious. Danny squeezed my arm while pretending to hug me. Text us if she turns out to be a murderer. I won't. You will if she's considerate. I hate you. No, you don't, she whispered, then glanced meaningfully at the woman beside me. And go have your fresh start. When they left, the city felt bigger. Or maybe the rooftop just felt smaller. The woman beside me finished her drink and set the glass down with a soft click. Do you want another? She asked. No, I said. Her eyes held mine. Do you want to leave? Yes. That was the alarming part. Not because I did not understand the question. I understood it perfectly. Yes, because I wanted to know what her apartment looked like. Yes, because I wanted to know what she looked like with less distance and fewer layers. Yes, because some quiet, reckless part of me wanted, for one night, to choose something based entirely on desire and not on whether it would age well in the morning. I barely know you, I said. And yet, I repeated. She slid off the stool in one smooth movement and stood in front of me. Up close, she was a little taller than I thought in heels, posture perfect, presence impossible. The white suit jacket sharpened the line of her shoulders. The silk beneath it caught the light when she moved. Her rings were simple and expensive. Her nails immaculate, pale, restrained. Nothing loud, nothing cheap, nothing accidental. I can fix the first part, she said. The knowing me part? The leaving with me part. That made me laugh under my breath. Confident. Realistic. And what exactly happens if I say no? Her mouth curved. Then I order another drink and spend the rest of the night being disappointed in your judgment. You think highly of yourself. She stepped just close enough for me to catch the deeper note of her perfume again. I have my moments. I should have asked her more. Last name. Actual work. Anything useful. Instead, I found myself reaching for my bag and saying, fine. Her eyes flashed. Not triumph. Something warmer than that. Something sharper too. Fine, she repeated. Don't get greedy. Oh, I'm always greedy. And somehow, against all good sense, that only made me want to go more. The elevator down from the rooftop had mirrored walls and dim gold lighting that should have made it feel luxurious. Instead, it felt intimate in a way I was not prepared for. We stood side by side, not touching, and the restraint was somehow louder than if she had put a hand on my back. The city spread beneath us as we descended. Blue-black water. Pools of neon. The moving thread of traffic. Her reflection stood beside mine in the glass. White suit, pale hair, a face that looked composed and dangerous from every angle. I looked at her in the mirror. She was already looking at me. What? I asked. You were going to say no. I still might. No, she said softly. You won't. The elevator doors opened before I could answer. Outside, the valet lane glowed under soft lights. A black car waited at the curb. Not hers, I realized when she opened the back door for me. A car service. Of course. Inside, the leather was cool against the backs of my legs. The partition stayed up. The city moved past in fractured color while the air conditioning hummed softly over our skin. She sat angled toward me, one arm along the seat, not crowding me, not touching me. Not yet. So I said, "Do I get a name before the abduction portion of the evening?" She smiled. Alice. It suited her so well it was irritating. "Parker," I said. "Alice and Parker," she repeated, as if testing the sound of it. "I like that." "That seems premature." "It's not." I shook my head, smiling despite myself. "You always talk like the conclusion has already been decided?" I asked. "Only when I can see it." "And what can you see?" Her gaze dropped briefly to my mouth, then lifted again. "That you've been trying not to look at me for the last 10 minutes, she said. Heat crawled up my throat. "That's a very convenient theory. It's a correct theory. You enjoy being right too much." "Yes," she said. "I really do." The car turned, and city lights flickered across her face. For 1 second, with the gold and shadow moving over her cheekbones, she looked almost unreal. Like the kind of woman whose photos ended up in magazines because money liked her. Because rooms opened for her. Because people moved when she entered them and convinced themselves afterward it had been their own idea. "So what's your terrible habit?" I asked. Her brow lifted. "Terrible habit? Everybody has one. Only one. Tonight you get one." She considered that. Losing interest too quickly. The honesty in it surprised me. Honest answer. "I don't lie when the truth is more useful." That sounds manipulative. It often is. Should I be worried? She looked at me very directly. "Not unless you want to be." I should have. Instead I said, "That was not reassuring." "It wasn't meant to be." Then, after the smallest pause, "What's yours?" I watched the city pass outside for a beat before I answered. "Staying too long after I know better." Something changed in her face then. Not softer exactly. More focused. The car ride from there felt shorter than it could possibly have been. Her building sat near the water, all glass and private discretion. The lobby smelled faintly of white flowers and polished stone. No cheap scent pumped through vents. No clutter. No noise. The kind of place designed to suggest that inconvenience simply did not happen there. The elevator up was private. That should have told me enough. Inside the apartment, the first thing I noticed was the view. Floor-to-ceiling windows. The ocean black and endless in the distance. The city laid out in glittering geometry below us. Inside, everything was muted and precise. Cream, charcoal, pale wood, warm light. Art that looked chosen, not bought in panic before guests arrived. A piano in the corner. A decanter on a low table. A single vase of white orchids. No mess. No half-done life visible anywhere. Then I noticed Alice watching me notice. "It's very subtle," I said. "I hate subtle." "I can tell." She took off her jacket, and I had to work much too hard not to stare. The silk under it moved with her, draping over a body that was somehow both elegant and impossible not to imagine touching. She set the jacket over a chair and crossed to the bar cart. "Drink?" she asked. I should have said no. I said, "Small." She poured 2 fingers into each glass and handed me one. Her hand brushed mine. Tiny contact. Completely useless. My body reacted like she had done much more. We stood by the windows and looked out over Miami as if we were not acutely aware of each other. She asked where I had grown up. I asked whether she always lived in places that looked like private equity fantasies. She laughed. I learned she liked old records more than playlists, that she hated people who confused confidence with depth, that she had a brother who thought she should make saner choices, and that she found this advice uninspiring. I told her she sounded difficult. She told me I sounded tempted. By difficulty? By me. I turned to face her fully then. "You're very sure I'm not going to run. You would have done it already." "That's arrogant." "Parker," she said, stepping closer, "you came home with me." The room seemed to narrow around that sentence. I tilted my chin. And now you're standing in my apartment, holding a drink you barely want, looking at me like you're trying to decide whether restraint is still worth the effort. My pulse was beating hard enough now that I could feel it in my throat. She was close enough that if I leaned the smallest amount, I would know whether her mouth was as distracting as I suspected. "What if I decide it is?" I asked. Her gaze stayed on mine. Then I walk you to the door. That stopped me. Because I had expected pressure. Teasing. Maybe another confident challenge. Not that. Not a clean exit offered without drama. Something in my chest loosened at the shape of it. Still okay? She asked quietly. The question landed more deeply than anything she had said all night. Consent should not have felt surprising. But with women like Alice, women who moved through the world as if permission and access had been arranged for them in advance, it did. Yes, I said. She set her glass down first. Then she reached up, not fast, not presumptuous, and brushed one strand of hair back from my shoulder. The touch was so light it made me inhale. Good, she said. The first kiss did not feel cautious. It felt deliberate. She kissed like she did most things, I realized quickly. Fully attentive, controlled until she chose not to be, and entirely aware of the effect she was having. One hand at my waist, the other at the side of my neck, her thumb resting just under my jaw. My drink was gone from my hand before I remembered setting it down. My fingers found the silk at her waist, then the line of her back beneath it, and she made the faintest sound against my mouth, approving and almost amused. That sounded something reckless to me. I kissed her harder. Her hand tightened at my waist. She turned us without breaking the kiss, and suddenly my back was against the glass, city lights breaking around us, Miami spread below like it existed only to witness bad decisions in expensive buildings. She drew back only enough to look at me. Mascara still perfect. Mouth not. You do not flirt like a woman making better decisions, she murmured. I was breathing hard enough to hate it. You are a terrible influence. Yes. Then she kissed me again. I will not pretend the rest of the night moved slowly. It didn't. It unfolded in fragments of sensation. Her mouth at the corner of mine. My fingers finding the smooth line of her shoulders after the silk slipped away. The way she watched my face as if every reaction mattered. The brief pauses where she checked me with a look, a word, a hand that waited instead of taking. The way restraint kept breaking and reforming between us. How laughter managed to slip in among the intensity once, when I nearly tripped on the edge of a rug and she caught me, smiling against my temple. Graceful, she murmured. Shut up. Never. There were sheets somewhere later. Cool white linen, tangled quickly. Warm skin. Kisses that moved from teasing to unsteady. Her whisper in my ear asking, still with me. My hand gripping fabric because she had learned very fast where to touch and where to pause. My breath coming apart in a way that made it impossible to sound composed. Her own composure fraying, which turned out to be one of the most intoxicating things I had ever seen. And then, mercifully, the world narrowed to heat and closeness, and the kind of night that makes you forget your own rules until morning forces them back on you. When I woke, dawn was barely staining the edge of the sky. For one soft, disoriented second, I did not know where I was. Then I felt the weight of an unfamiliar sheet over my legs, smelled the trace of Alice's perfume on the pillow, and remembered all of it at once. The boardroom. No, not the boardroom yet. The job. First day. Monday. Oh God. Alice lay asleep beside me on her stomach, one arm folded under the pillow. Blonde hair spilled across the white sheets in a way that looked almost innocent if you ignored the evidence of the previous night scattered across the room. Her face at rest was quieter. Younger, maybe. Less sharpened. The arrogance did not show as much when she slept. That turned out to be almost as unfair as the rest of her. I slipped out of bed carefully, gathering my clothes piece by piece in the pale morning light. My dress was on the floor near the window. One heel under a chair. My phone somehow on the dresser across the room. I checked the time and nearly swore out loud. I was going to make it. Barely. In the bathroom, I took one look at myself and exhaled in disbelief. My hair was wild. My lipstick gone. My eyes bright in that specific, infuriating way that announces to your own reflection that you have made a reckless choice and enjoyed it thoroughly. I splashed water on my face, found enough of myself to pass for functional, and stepped back into the bedroom with my shoes in one hand. Alice had not moved. For a second, I just looked at her. It would have been easy to leave without a thought. Easier, maybe. Clean break. Anonymous ending to an impulsive night. The sort of thing adults in cities did all the time. But something about the quiet of the room stopped me. So I crossed back to the bed, found a card on the nightstand from some absurdly expensive florist or hotel or both, turned it over, and wrote in the blank space on the back. You were right. Terrible decisions can be interesting. Parker. I hesitated, then added. Try not to be too disappointed in my judgment. I have work in 4 hours. I set it beside her phone and slipped out. The elevator ride down felt unreal. By the time I reached the street, the city had shifted into morning mode. Delivery trucks. Runners near the water. Coffee carts. Heat already rising off the pavement. I got into the first car I could find and gave my address while trying not to think about the fact that I had less than an hour to shower, dress, and become a competent professional with no visible trace of the woman whose mouth I could still remember in embarrassing detail. The whole morning blurred. Shower too hot. Coffee too fast. Hands a little unsteady while buttoning my blouse. I chose navy because it felt serious. Structured. A color that reminded me of balance sheets and controlled breathing. I pulled my hair into a low knot, used concealer under my eyes, and ignored the part of me that wondered whether Alice had found the note yet. By the time I walked into Bradley Capital Group's headquarters, I had rebuilt myself into something sharp enough to face a first day. The building was exactly what you would expect from a major Miami corporation with too much money and no desire to apologize for it. Glass exterior. Expansive lobby. Security desks that looked more like concierge stations. Art big enough to seem important. The whole place running on chilled air and discretion. I introduced myself to reception, got my badge, and followed a woman from HR through a sequence of bright hallways and conference rooms where everything smelled faintly of coffee and polished surfaces. People smiled. People shook my hand. People used phrases like excited to have you and huge growth opportunity. I smiled back. I answered cleanly. I took notes. I did everything a newly hired senior analyst is supposed to do when she is not actively thinking about the fact that 12 hours earlier she had been pinned against glass by a woman whose last name she still did not know. Then I met Mike Bradley. I knew the name, of course. Everyone in the industry knew the Bradleys. Old money made modern, but not soft. Strategic. Aggressive. Good instincts with risk. Better instincts with acquisition. Mike Bradley, CEO, had a reputation for being decisive without becoming theatrical about it, which in finance counted as almost charming. In person, he was warmer than I expected. Tall, dark hair, open expression, tailored charcoal suit, wedding band. He looked like the kind of man who knew his calendar 5 weeks out and still remembered his children's school schedules. His handshake was firm, his smile easy, and his eyes very quickly gave away that he noticed more than he volunteered. Parker, he said, glancing at the file in front of him before looking up. Glad you're here. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. We've heard good things. That's always a little terrifying. He laughed. It should be. Something about him made it easier to relax. Not too much. Just enough. He spent the next stretch of the morning walking me through active priorities, team structure, the logic behind recent shifts in one of their portfolios. He asked clean questions and listened to the answers. Twice he looked mildly pleased by something I said and wrote something in the margin of his notes. It helped. The work always helped. Numbers calmed me. Forecasting calmed me. Models, assumptions, scenario planning. All of it put my mind back into a shape I trusted. By noon, I had almost convinced myself the night before belonged to a separate life. Then Mike checked the time and said, I want you sitting in on the board strategy meeting this afternoon. I looked up from my notes. Today. Yes. For observation? For context, he said. You're going to be working close enough to major decisions that it's better if you see how the machine actually moves. A reasonable explanation. A smart one even. I should have been pleased. Instead, for no good reason at all, a thin unease moved through me. Of course, I said. The hours between lunch and the meeting passed in fragments. Data summaries. Introductions. Passwords that would inevitably need resetting. A tour of the floor. A quick stop at the coffee station where 2 women from compliance asked where I had worked before and whether I lived near Brickell. At some point, I caught my own reflection in a glass wall and thought I looked composed. That was optimistic. At 3:15, Mike stood from his desk, picked up a folder, and nodded toward the door. Come on. The boardroom occupied a corner of the top executive floor and looked out over water and skyline in 2 directions. The doors were thick. The table enormous. Everything in the room was designed to imply permanence. Not comfort. Permanence. When Mike opened the door, a few people were already seated. 2 older men in dark suits. A woman with silver hair and rimless glasses. Another man standing by the windows, speaking quietly into his phone. I followed Mike in, taking the seat he indicated slightly down the table from him, set my notebook in front of me and lifted my eyes. And stopped breathing. Alice sat 3 seats from the head of the table in a cream silk blouse under a fitted blazer the exact color of expensive champagne. Her hair was pinned back today, exposing the clean line of her throat and a pair of gold earrings I recognized because one of them had brushed my shoulder sometime around midnight. She had one hand resting near a tablet, the other lightly curled around a pen. Composed. Polished. Untouchable. She looked up. Our eyes met. For one impossible second, the room split cleanly in half. There was the boardroom. The chilled air, the leather chairs, Mike taking his seat, papers shifting, someone asking for updated numbers. And there was last night, her mouth at mine, white sheets, city lights on glass, the note I had left on her bedside table. Shock hit me so hard I felt it physically. Not just because I recognized her. Because she recognized me and did not so much as blink. If anything, the corner of her mouth moved. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for me to know she was enjoying this. Mike was saying something. I missed the first part of it entirely. And Parker will be joining us on the analytics side moving forward. I forced air into my lungs. Thank you. Alice leaned back in her chair, eyes still on me. No visible reaction. No sign of the night before. No trace of the woman who had laughed into my mouth and asked me, in a voice gone rough at the edges, whether I was still with her. Only that gaze. Steady. Bright with recognition. Terribly, terribly amused. Then finally she spoke. Her voice was cool enough for the room, warm enough for me to hear the private edge under it. Well, she said, holding my eyes across polished wood and corporate silence, this just made Monday interesting. And that was how I found out the woman I had gone home with the night before was Alice Bradley. Board member. Powerful. Untouchable. And judging by the look in her eyes, nowhere near done with me. If this opening pulled you in, make sure you like and subscribe, because stories only keep growing when people actually show up for them. And tell me in the comments